We are at this conference, we are at this dinner to discuss Israel, the United States, and the Iranian nuclear threat. And as Professor Krantz mentioned, I have a lengthy essay in the current issue of Commentary magazine, where I argue why I believe Iran cannot be contained, as a great many self-described foreign policy realists seem to believe, and that a nuclear Iran would provoke a cascade of crises stretching on for many years and well beyond the borders of the Middle East. And tonight, I do not intend to rehearse the arguments that I made there. Nor do I intend to make the case, although it is my belief, that a military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities is in all likelihood the only practicable way by which Iran's nuclear ambition may now be blocked. The strategic and tactical issues, I believe, have been well covered in your panel sessions today. I also do not want to spend my time, the bulk of my time, reprising the catalog of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's Holocaust denials or his calls to wipe Israel off the map. Nor do I want to rehearse here the general failure so far and probably going forward of the West to confront the Iranian regime and all that it represents in any meaningful way. We are all familiar with the state of play. And what that state of play boils down to is that as Iran has become more intransigent, as its rhetoric has become more strident, as its methods have become more nakedly brutal, as its nuclear bid has come closer to fruition, the West has only become more pliant, more indifferent, more feckless, and more resigned to living with a nuclear Iran. So the real question is, why is this happening? How is it that in the face of Iran's extreme and aggressive illiberalism, so many Western liberals seem to be so befuddled and helpless to mount a coherent intellectual counterattack? Indeed, why is it that more than a few self-described liberals have all but allowed themselves to become accomplices, usually unwittingly, but sometimes not, in furthering Iran's ambitions? At the same time, we must also ask ourselves, how is it that Israel, the routine object of Ahmadinejad's annihilatory threats, is routinely portrayed as the Middle East's principal provocateur? These seem to me to be the most profound questions. Questions not of tactics or strategy, nor of politics or morality, but of psychology and philosophy. These are the questions to which we most urgently need answers if we are to confront not just the strategic and political challenge of Iran, but the moral challenge of a new anti-Semitism at which Iran stands at the vanguard. To find the answers, what I think is needed is an understanding of what you might call the mechanics or the methodologies of demonization. Now, when we think of the demonization of a people, we tend to think of it as a process of whipping up hatred, spreading lies, trafficking in conspiracy theories, indulging in invidious stereotypes, and so on. And this is a well-established pattern that covers Nazi Germany's treatment of the Jews, Maoist China's treatment of its own so-called intellectuals, and of course what happened in Rwanda in the early 1990s. But there is another, more crucial aspect to that methodology, which has fostered a broader culture of indifference and ultimately acceptance of that demonization as being somehow inevitable or normal or even, to some extent, justifiable. You're probably all familiar with a famous line usually attributed to Edmund Burke, that all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So how do you get good men to do nothing? More to the point, how does Iran get good men and good women to do nothing? Now, a powerful answer, I think, was offered with a very different set of issues in mind by Daniel Patrick Moynihan in his famous 1993 essay, Defining Deviancy Down. The late US Senator was trying to understand how it was that Americans had come to accept as a given stratospheric levels of social deviancy that would have shocked people a generation earlier. His short answer was that, and I quote, "Over the past generation, the amount of deviant behavior in American society has increased beyond the levels the community can, quote, afford to recognize, and that accordingly, we have been redefining deviancy so as to exempt much conduct previously stigmatized and also quietly raising the normal level. I'm sure that most of you will immediately recognize that something similar has been going on with respect to our attitudes about Iran. Back in the 1990s, the West breathed a collective sigh of relief when a supposed moderate, Mohammad Khatami, was elected president after the tenure of Hashemi Rafsanjani, who was then seen, and indeed is, an ultra-hardliner. But after Ahmadinejad was elected in 2005, one increasingly saw references to Rafsanjani as a principled pragmatist. And last July, following the Iranian election, the Reuters news agency, our favorite news agency, actually described Rafsanjani as a, quote, moderate. Now, Rafsanjani is not a man who has, to my knowledge, moderated his ideological positions in any way. He is wanted by Interpol and by the Argentine government for his role in ordering the 1994 bombing of the Jewish Cultural Center in Buenos Aires, in which 85 people were murdered and hundreds more injured. About Adolf Hitler, he has said that, quote, Europe resolved a great problem, the problem of the Zionist danger. That is to say, it resolved it, or Hitler resolved it by killing 6 million Jews. He has also said, and again I quote, that the use of even one nuclear bomb inside Israel will destroy everything. However, it will only harm the Islamic world. It is not irrational to contemplate such an eventuality. By what measure, then, can Rafsanjani be described as a moderate? How does Iranian deviancy get defined down? And the answer is that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad defines it down. He does so by calling Israel to be wiped off the map, not once, but dozens of times. He does it not just by hinting elliptically at his Holocaust denial, but by hosting a conference of deniers in Tehran. He does so not just by stealing an election, but by stealing it brazenly, and then putting his political opponents and even a few foreign citizens in front of kangaroo courts. He does so not just by practicing repressive policies at home, but by flaunting his illiberalism before an audience of students at Columbia University. He does so not just by upping the nuclear ante, but by upping it again every time the West proposes to come to terms.